දවස් 30ක්ම unlimited Netflix බලන්න. unlimited data pack එකක් මුළු පවුලටම unlimited fun එකක් අරගන්න. අදම active කරගන්න.
ලෙන්ගතුකම වැඩි කරගන්න ලව්ජු රුපියල් 50ට අඩු කළා.
මාමේ එන්න අපිට එකක් බොමු.
Tonight, tending to the flock. The Archbishop of Colombo says breaking safety rules is an act of selfishness during a new normal midnight mass. New strain, no strain. Medical expert addresses public fears of the new UK strain.
It looks like it's contagious, but it's common to all coronavirus strains.
Jump into action. The central bank announces remedial action to curb rupee free fall. Lions on safari. Sri Lanka gets back into action in Boxing Day test against South Africa tomorrow. All that and much more coming up on First at 9. This Friday, the 25th of December, 2020.
From AdaDerana, this is AdaDerana First at 9.
Nava sunlight sakura. Then Dikukal Pavatina Sakura Mal Suandin.
Live from Studio 24 in Colombo.
Good evening and a Merry Christmas to all. I'm Dhammika Kanaka. Now at midnight last night, Christmas Day commemorating the birth of Christ dawned for Christians in Sri Lanka, facing up to the realities of life in the new normal. At the main midnight mass service of the St. Sebastian Shrine in Kandana, Archbishop of Colombo, His Eminence Malcolm Cardinal Ranjith, called on followers of Christ to inculcate selflessness into their lives and consider the needs of others more as of greater importance than their own. The Archbishop of Colombo added that anyone who openly flouts health and safety regulations in public only serve to degrade the importance of the regulations.
Christmas Day, the day that commemorates the birth of Jesus Christ, the Savior of man, dawned at midnight yesterday. Born in Bethlehem 2020 years ago according to the Christian calendar, his birth sealed the covenant between God and mankind and signified hope and peace among men. Further, the birth of the Savior was expected to lead to the redemption of mankind and save the world from sin. With that, the main Christmas midnight mass service was held at the Shrine of St. Sebastian in Kandana last night. Archbishop of Colombo, His Eminence Malcolm Cardinal Ranjith, presided over the service. Unlike in years past, where worshippers would have thronged in their hundreds for the service, this time, due to the pandemic-related restrictions and public uncertainty over increasing cases of COVID-19, only 50 devotees were allowed to attend.
වසංගතය ආවට පස්සේ අපේ ලංකාවේ මිනිස්සු බොහෝ දෙනෙකුට එදිනෙදා වේල හොයාගන්නට බැරි තත්ත්වයක් ඇති වෙලා තියෙනවා. මේ කොවිඩ් වසංගතය ආවේ කොහොමද කියලා අපි විමර්ශනය කිරීම සුදුසුයි. මේවා නිකම් එන්නේ නැහැ. මනුෂ්‍යයාගේ ආත්මාර්ථකාමීත්වය තුලින් ජනිත වුණු දේවල්. අපේ ජීවිතය තුළ අපිට වඩා අන්‍යයන් වැදගත් කියලා හිතන්නට අපි පුරුදු විය යුතුයි. පේනවා නේද අද ලංකාවේ කොවිඩ් වසංගතය ඇවිල්ලා තියෙද්දි සමහර උදවිය ඉන්නවා මේ නීති රීති තුට්ටුවකටවත් ගණන් ගන්නේ නැහැ. ඒගොල්ලෝ ඒවා කඩනවා විතරක් නෙමෙයි ඒවා පරිභවයට ලක් කරනවා. මේ වෙලාවේ දේශපාලන නායකයෝ දේශපාලන පක්ෂ Tamanගේ ભેද අතහැරලා දාලා සියලු දෙනාම එකතු වෙලා රට ආරක්ෂා කර ගන්නට කටයුතු කරනවා වෙනුවට බොරු විවේචන කර කර මේ කරන සමාජ ව්‍යසනය නරක දෙයක්. අපට දෙන ඒ සෞඛ්‍ය උපදෙස් ගෞරවයෙන් යුතුව පිළිපදින්නට ඕනේ.
In addition to the main service, other church services were held throughout the island with minimal participation. Meanwhile, special security was provided for church services throughout the island last night on the instructions of the IGP. Devotees who were unable to attend church services, however, were able to participate in religious observances in the safety of their homes. In the meantime, the Christmas service and carols organized by the Derana Media Network was held at the Our Lady of Lourdes Church in Kimalopitia yesterday.
Safeguard hand sanitizer නවතම නිෂ්පාදන පෙළ නීරෝගිමත් දිවියකට ලංකාවේ පළමු වරට හඳුන්වා දෙන මැලිබන් වෙජි ක්‍රැකර්
Crunchy veggie.
Now, attendance at the traditional Christmas Eve Mass presided over by the Pope at St. Peter's Basilica in Rome was subdued yesterday, with no tourists and worshippers absent due to restrictions. His Holiness Pope Francis called on his flock to learn to accept their weaknesses with tender love, and that the God's message is that serving the poor is the highest form of love for God. Elsewhere, celebrations were subdued as expected, with social distancing laws and people gathering in crowds taking effect in the new normal. Christmas celebrations around the world were worked off in the new normal under the cloud of COVID-19 pandemic this time around. Christmas Eve masses had to be held under the COVID-19 health and safety protocols. Accordingly, Pope Francis led a low-key Christmas Eve Mass at the rear section of the St. Peter's Basilica. The Mass was worked off with minimal public participation, with a small number of cardinals and bishops. Further, the Mass began 2 hours earlier than usual so that even the limited number of people who attended could return home before the curfew scheduled to be imposed at 10 p.m.
Il figlio di Dio è nato scartato, per dirci che ogni scartato è figlio di Dio. È venuto al mondo come viene al mondo un bimbo, debole e fragile, perché noi possiamo accogliere con tenerezza. Dio prende dimora vicino a noi, povero e bisognoso, per dirci che servendo i poveri ameremo Lui.
Meanwhile, Pope Francis conveyed the Urbi et Orbi prayer within the St. Peter's Basilica this time around. He usually conveys this message at the St. Peter's Square in front of the public. However, no public presence was witnessed following the lockdown imposed in Italy. In Palestine, meanwhile, a midnight mass was worked off in the Church of Nativity, believed by Christians to be the birthplace of Jesus Christ. The mass in the West Bank town of Bethlehem, which usually attracts hundreds of tourists and worshippers from around the world, was nearly empty this year amid COVID-19 rules and restrictions. In the meantime, in France, a Christmas Eve choral concert was held earlier this month at the Notre Dame Cathedral in Paris. The concert was recorded at the cathedral and was broadcast on French television just before midnight yesterday. The cathedral, however, is still closed to the public and masses are cancelled. With face shields and masks and sitting over a meter away from each other, Filipino Catholics celebrated Christmas with a difference this year brought about by the coronavirus pandemic. The Manila Cathedral in the Philippines capital usually accommodates 800 worshippers. However, 80 were only allowed at a time following government protocols on mass gatherings. In Singapore, meanwhile, social distancing, wearing face masks and other health and safety guidelines were observed in Christmas celebrations. Now, the traditional Christmas messages from President Gotabaya Rajapaksa, Prime Minister Mahinda Rajapaksa and opposition leader Sajith Premadasa echoed similar sentiments this year, stating that the Christmas theme of sharing and charity can be invaluable in facing the challenge of the pandemic. President Gotabaya, in his message, stated that the doctrine of Jesus Christ encompasses a body of teachings that contributes to the perpetuation of society and can be utilized to revive the economically, socially and culturally disrupted world in the wake of the COVID-19 pandemic.
In his traditional Christmas message today, President Gotabaya Rajapaksa noted that Christmas exemplifies noble values that make up the foundation of civilized human society, such as peace, love, kindness, coexistence and compassion preached and demonstrated by Jesus Christ. The President added that from a social perspective, Christmas is also a joyous occasion for Christian families to get together, exchange gifts, forget enmity and renew bonds. The President also highlighted the fact that the doctrine preached by Lord Jesus Christ encompasses a body of teachings that contributes to the perpetuation of society. He also reminded that foremost among these teachings is the elimination of the darkness of sin and help for those who have been neglected and marginalized, with a sense of brotherhood and commitment to the salvation of mankind. The President added that such a doctrine can be utilized to revive the economically, socially and culturally disrupted world in the wake of COVID-19. Meanwhile, touching on the Easter attacks, the President stated that the government has been able to dispel the feeling of fear and insecurity that was generated as a result, and to bestow everyone with the opportunity to engage in religious observances freely. The head of state also promised that in the same manner, justice too will be meted out to the affected. Meanwhile, Prime Minister Mahinda Rajapaksa, in his Christmas message, said that the birth of Christ represents peace, forgiveness, mercy and above all else, hope. The Premier expressed his wish for this Christmas to be a promise to the people of hope renewed and called it a time to spread joy and goodwill while appreciating blessings in the presence of loved ones. The Prime Minister also thanked doctors, nurses, volunteers, the military, police officers and everyone in service who tirelessly contribute to the community's welfare and safety during these perilous times. He added that despite the pandemic having placed barriers preventing the people from reuniting with loved ones, we must all unite in spirit to overcome its challenges. In conclusion, the Prime Minister stated that the greatest gift we can give each other this Christmas is assuring the shared safety of our loved ones by adhering to COVID-19 guidelines. In his Christmas message, opposition leader Sajid Premadasa called on the people to help each other and celebrate Christmas with peace and love. The opposition leader reminded the public that through humanity, Jesus Christ taught us to respect all human beings and to understand nature and the environment as a whole. He also said that with the main theme of Christmas being peace, no religious leader advocated for extremism or terrorism, and that the world will be even more wonderful if people learn to love each other more. Further, the opposition leader added that religion exists to keep man alive and not to persecute him, and that Jesus Christ showed people a way to dedicate themselves to a world where love and compassion thrives. Touching on the global pandemic, he added that as Christians celebrate Christmas when the world is in a state of shock, helping others affected economically by the pandemic as much as possible is a reminder of the true Christmas meaning.
Now, turning our attention towards the pandemic situation, the Government Medical Officers Association alerts the authorities to the rising COVID-19 case numbers in the districts of Kandy, Ampara and Ratnapura. This is on top of the Western Province continuing to lead in the daily infection numbers. Police, meanwhile, continue to call on people to cooperate with the authorities in coronavirus combat efforts, as 2 areas in Dikwella were isolated today.
During the course of yesterday, 592 COVID-19 infections were found from 20 districts across the island, with 245 of them being confirmed from virus hotspot, the Colombo district. The infections found in Colombo included 48 from Vellavatta, 42 from Vellampetya, 17 from Kolpiti, 15 from Grand Pass, 13 from Matakulya, 13 from Kirlapana and 10 from Halsdorf. Apart from Colombo, 140 infections were reported from Kalutara, 66 from Gampa, 17 from Ratnapura, 16 from Matale, 14 from Kurunagala and 13 from Gaul were confirmed. Further 12 infections each were recorded from Kegol, Kandy and Batiklo, 9 from Mulativu, 7 from Matara, 6 from Nuwar Elia and 4 infections each from Trincomalee and Ampara were also recorded. What's more, 3 infections each from Hambantota, Anuradhapura and Badula, as well as 1 infection each from both Puttalam and Polonnaruwa were also identified yesterday.
වාර්තා වෙච්ච රෝගීන්ගෙන් දෙසැම්බර් මාසය තුල 76ක් වාර්තා වෙලා තියෙන බස්නාහිර පළාතේ. ඒතර තාමත් බස්නාහිර පළාතේ ඇතුලේ අවදානම කේන්ද්‍රගත වෙලා තියෙනයි කියන එක පැහැදිලි. බස්නාහිර පළාතෙන් පිට වැඩිම අවදානම තියෙන්නේ මහනුවර දිස්ත්‍රික්කයේ ඇතුලේ. මේ මාසය ඇතුළත විතරක් මහනුවර දිස්ත්‍රික්කයේ ඇතුලෙන් රෝගීන් 953ක් වාර්තා වෙලා තියෙනවා. ඊගවට අම්පාර දිස්ත්‍රික්කයේ ඇතුලේ. ඊළඟට රත්නපුර දිස්ත්‍රික්කයේ ඇතුලේ. දැන් මේ කවුරුවත් හිතන්නේ නැති ප්‍රදේශ මේවා.
In the meantime, steps were taken to isolate the Yonakapura East and Yonakapura West Gramanidadari divisions in the area of Dikwella with immediate effect, following a spike in COVID-19 cases there. Meanwhile, the police continue to urge people in isolated areas not to violate isolation orders, as it is a punishable offence by law.
We would like to make a request from the inmates of isolated area. You should not leave the area or your residence under any circumstances. If any person violates the isolation rule, they could be dealt with the quarantine and prevention of diseases ordinance. If a person is found on the charges of breaking isolation rules, the court can impose 10,000 rupees fine, and in addition to that 6 months rigorous imprisonment. Over 100,000 persons have been ordered to follow the self-quarantine or the home quarantine procedures. Therefore, if you have been ordered to follow home quarantine procedures, you are not allowed to leave your premises. Therefore, be at home and obey the health rules, guidelines and regulations.
Meanwhile, the intensive care unit, which is established at the District General Hospital in Kalutara to treat COVID-19 patients, was declared open today by the Secretary to the State Ministry of Primary Healthcare, Epidemics and COVID-19 Disease Control, Dr. Amal Harsha De Silva. This unit is capable of treating 4 COVID-19 patients at any one time. As things stand, the total number of COVID-19 recoveries in Sri Lanka stands at 31,339, with 771 patients being discharged from the hospitals during the course of the day. That puts the country's total number of active cases at 8,258.
Now, the sudden emergence of a new 70% more transmissible virus in the UK has given further rise to public fears as Sri Lankans still grapple with its current one. However, Director of Operations and Clinical Services at the Allergy, Immunology and Cell Biology Unit of the Sri Jayawardhanapura University, Dr. Chandima Jeevandara says that existing public health protocols should be sufficient for protection.
With the available data, we don't have to worry too much about the new strain. There are few questions that people asking from us, whether is this more contagious. It looks like it's contagious, but it's common to all coronavirus strains. If we adhere to our basic principles like wearing a mask, maintaining social distancing and hand washing, we can prevent the spread of the virus. The second question people ask from us is whether we have the laboratory facilities in Sri Lanka. Yes, we do have, because Sri Lanka has plenty of diagnostic laboratories which accurately can detect the coronavirus. Since of late we use multiple targets to identify coronavirus, so most of our labs uses these latest kits with multiple targets. The only problem is we don't have sequencing facilities widely available. For example, University of Sri Jayawardhanapura Allergy, Immunology and Cell Biology Unit has a fully fledged sequencing facility where we have been doing sequencing for the past so many months. From the very first case of corona infection, we can accurately sequence the virus, and we do have all the technical people as well as the analytical people to accurately determine the existing circulating viral strains in Sri Lanka. So as general public, you should not be worried or panicked about this new strain if you adhere to the basic principles. And the other question is whether do we need any extra quarantine due to this new strain. The current available data does not support any regulations as such, so there are no changes to the number of days you need to quarantine after exposure or infection. The other question that we get is whether what is the effect to the medicines or the vaccines. As you know, as at present we don't have a medicine from the western side to coronaviral infections, and there are 2 vaccines registered in some parts of the world, and we don't have concrete data to say that there will be any inefficiency in the vaccine outcome, because it's very early to say at the moment. So we are waiting for new data to emerge probably in early January, February to determine whether we have any effect to the vaccines with the new strain.
India says that it is currently working with Sri Lanka on a $100 million credit line to the island nation in the solar power sector, which includes the commissioning of floating solar power plants in Sri Lanka. Now, the Indian High Commission in Colombo said that this multi-pronged project envisages enhancement of solar power usage in government buildings and low-income households through the installation of rooftop units and commissioning of floating solar power plants in Sri Lanka. It said that collaboration in renewable and sustainable energy is a focus area for governments of both countries, and that Sri Lanka is a founding member of the International Solar Alliance, which was anchored by India. Further, the recently inaugurated 100-megawatt wind power project at Tambapavani in Mannar involved the participation of technical experts from India. The Indian High Commission said that the geographies of the 2 countries offer bright prospects for a deeper partnership in the fields of solar and wind energy. The need for a committee with multi-religious representation to further Sri Lanka's religious coexistence had been highlighted when the Buddhist Advisory Council met yesterday. Buddhist Advisory Council met for the 7th occasion yesterday at the Presidential Secretariat. During the meeting, members of the clergy had said that President Gotabaya Rajapaksa had laid a strong foundation to many national policies during a year strewn with obstacles. They had also reiterated that the expectation of the people was for better security following the sector's collapse since 2015, a disciplined society free from drugs and underworld activities, elimination of profligacy and corruption, an efficient state administrative service, as well as a foreign policy which protects the country's identity. The President's media unit said that members of the clergy present had commended the President for laying the foundation for a process which will change the country's direction, including a national education policy, a program to protect national heritages, and a new constitution amid various obstacles, including the COVID-19 pandemic. They had also highlighted the preparation of the social environment for religious coexistence, while giving prominence to Buddhism as expected by the members of the clergy as a victory of the people. Further, the need for a committee with the representation of all religious leaders to take that process forward had also been emphasized. Now, in other local news, a considerable number of birds have been found dead across the paddy fields in the area of Ralmaduwa in Vanathavillu of Puttlam. The Wildlife Office of Vanathavillu said that around 200 birds, including bushlarks, white-backed munias and pigeons, were found dead. It added that the birds may have ingested some manner of toxin as a result of human activity and that other animals feeding on the carcasses too could perish. As such, the dead birds were removed from the scene. The Wildlife Office of Vanathavillu has launched an investigation into the incident. We will see you shortly after this break. Stay with us.
Ceylon Bank, the bank with a heart.
Welcome back. You're watching First at 9. Now, the central bank announces that it aims to take a remedial action to curb the downward tumble of the Sri Lankan rupee. The Sri Lankan rupee had been showing serious depreciation against the US dollar in the recent past, surging to its highest buying and selling levels since April this year. The rupee today was quoted by the central bank at 189 rupees and 8 cents, and the central bank says that remedial action will target the stabilizing of the rupee at November levels of 185 rupees.
In the past week, the Sri Lankan rupee has once again come under significant pressure and continued to trade weaker on the back of the COVID-19 pandemic effect. With that, the central bank has labelled the recent increasing volatility in the exchange rate as unwarranted and unacceptable. Issuing a statement in this regard, the bank stated that it aims to take aggressive action to contain the volatility in the domestic foreign exchange market. The central bank says that it expects such remedial action together with the continuation of the curtailment of non-essential imports to enable the rupee to appreciate within the next few days towards back to November levels below 185 rupees per US dollar. The central bank also reiterates that official reserves remain at sufficient levels with gross official reserves of 5.6 billion US dollars. Moreover, the central bank stated that discussions with its domestic and foreign counterparts to boost the level of reserves are also reaching an advanced stage of conclusion. According to the central bank's daily exchange report, the buying rate of a US dollar stands at 189 rupees and 8 cents today and a selling rate of 194 rupees and 66 cents. This is the highest buying and selling rate recorded for a US dollar since the 30th of April this year.
Now, South Africa has expressed willingness to balance trade ties with Sri Lanka while conceding the possibility of providing some relief to the island nation by lowering tea tariffs for a period of time. The Foreign Ministry says that outgoing South African High Commissioner in Colombo, Robina P. Marks, made the offer during the recent Sri Lanka-South Africa business promotion meeting. The Foreign Ministry quotes South African High Commissioner in Colombo, Robina P. Marks, as saying that her country had been able to expand its trade footprint in Sri Lanka and that overall trade stood hugely in favour of her country. South Africa is Sri Lanka's largest source of imports and the second largest export destination in the African region. Imports from South Africa largely consist of coal, and Sri Lankan exports comprise of bulk tea, apparel and rubber products. Commenting further on bilateral trade ties in the COVID-19 era during the virtual Sri Lanka-South Africa business promotion meeting, Marks had underscored the need to recalibrate its trade strategy in Sri Lanka and the desire for a more balanced trade relationship between the two countries. She had noted that even though national interest is important to all countries, South Africa wants a more balanced trade between Sri Lanka and South Africa, and that it is important since both countries need to work on the basis that each have something to offer in this bilateral relationship. Addressing concerns over market access for Sri Lankan tea, the High Commissioner had said that South Africa would consider possibly a request to lower for a period of time not exceeding 3 years tea tariffs to give some relief to Sri Lanka in the spirit of supporting developing countries become sustainable as they can be. The South African High Commissioner had also exchanged views with representatives of the Sri Lankan business community on the possibility of boosting fish exports to South Africa, value addition and knowledge sharing in the gem and jewellery industry, opportunities in the renewable energy sector, and sharing expertise in food preservation in the canning industry. We will see you once more on the other side of this break. Bear with us. Welcome back. Now, UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson has announced strict Tier 4 measures with movement restrictions clouding the country's Christmas celebrations following reports that the virus strain spreading through the country is 70% more transmissible. Our UK correspondent Nalin Pereira has more on the developments from London.
After the confirmation that the new variant of COVID-19 is 70% more transmissible than the old variant and spreading rapidly, Prime Minister Boris Johnson scrapped the planned relaxation of rules for Christmas for millions of people and put their areas into Tier 4, which is the highest level of restrictions. The Health Secretary has suggested that the Tier 4 coronavirus restrictions could last a few months until the vaccination rollout becomes effective. After the announcement of the new variant of the virus, France banned all travel from UK, including the Dover port, which resulted in a backlog of around 5,000 lorries waiting on the motorways to cross the channel. There have been nearly 2.15 million confirmed cases since the beginning of the pandemic, with just over 69,000 deaths. This means on average, just around 500 deaths were recorded every single day last week. In terms of a 7-day average, the rate of growth is over 33,000 reported cases per day, and currently over 20,000 COVID-19 patients still are in the hospitals. The UK was the first country to give the approval for the Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine. The rollout started with just 72 locations to begin with, and now over 500,000 people have been vaccinated. The information and the situation here in the UK is changing on an hourly basis. There are suggestions if things do not improve, the country could go into another national lockdown in the new year.
Now, the first test match between the touring Sri Lankan team and South Africa will get underway in Centurion in South Africa tomorrow. The contest marks the first test match to be played by the Sri Lankan cricket team since March this year. The series comprises of 2 matches, and Sri Lanka recorded a historic win in the last 2-match test series to be held in South Africa. The match will get underway at 1:30 p.m. Sri Lankan time. And that's it from all of us here at First at 9. Have a good holiday. Bye-bye.